Well, ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to give everyone an update on the current Doge situation with Elon Musk. It's been announced he's done interviews looking dejected, talking about him stepping away. He's not happy with the lack of cooperation from Congress when it comes to codifying the cuts. Supposedly, originally, people were talking about them saying they wanted around $2 trillion in cuts. I think it was 1 trillion, and then another trillion was potentially them just saving money off of the next spending bill. Obviously, that's not happening. But if you were going to try and cut $2 trillion, I mean, that was going to be something that was virtually impossible. It would certainly cause significant effects in terms of lack of economic output. You could say, well, that's something that we need to do anyways because of the current deficit, the amount of interest we put towards the debt. The big number is around 13 to 14% of our budget is just servicing the debt, and that's only going to go up. The other thing I want to talk about before we even get into this is you've got whatever they're saying, which is like $150 billion in supposed cuts that apparently they can't even get Congress to codify. I believe that's what Musk has been talking about. The original goal was 1 trillion, but it's also become known and abundantly clear they were not allowed to touch the Pentagon, so defense spending, and they were not allowed to touch the big three in terms of the entitlements, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. Now, Trump is cutting supposedly around 90 billion in Medicaid, which is the least expensive of the big three in terms of yearly spending. But apparently it's around $900 billion over 10 years. You factor that every year, it's around $90 billion in saving. And they say those cuts are coming from illegal immigrants using Medicaid, along with people here temporarily gaming the system. But the point is, when you're talking about Doge, you have the entitlements, which is like 50% of our budget already, the big three, along with defense spending, which is another 8 to 9%, along with servicing the debt, which is another 13 to 14%. That's about 73, 74% of the budget that supposedly Doge was not allowed to touch. So how are you going to make a crazy inroads? And I guess the big thing for Doge was probably the USAID, getting rid of that, which is only around 20 billion per year, which I agreed with, by the way, because they said it was for soft power. There was very little soft power that was being used through those initiatives to where we're just giving poor countries money. And it's like, well, we get something back. No, we don't. And honestly, that's not something that we should do anyways. The way the Chinese utilize their soft power is very, very evil. And they exploit countries and basically extort them by giving them predatory loans. We weren't even doing that with USAID. We were trying to spread democracy, and it was really just a total sham, and they exposed a lot of it, but it was irrelevant. At least we saved $20 billion a year off of that. But you're talking about we know the budget, multiple trillions, $6-7 trillion, you're saving 20 billion. Now they're saying, well, people are even disputing whether or not Doge saved the 150 billion because they're saying it's less than that. But the point is, Musk was very frustrated with the situation within Doge to where they weren't allowed to touch a lot of the biggest expenditures in terms of the entitlement, the defense spending. Where's the Pentagon audit? Everyone was talking about they haven't passed an audit in so long. Are they not giving them an audit? What is happening with that? We know that this was going to be something, it was going to have to be a titanic effort because of the checks and balances within the US government, how it's laid out, the bureaucratic hurdles. And you're even seeing it with Trump to where they're trying to cut things like the Department of Education, and now that's being challenged as well. So Musk has not been happy. We'll see if these cuts go into effect, but even if they do, you're talking about even the 150 billion in supposed cuts is disputed in terms of some of it. People say, well, no, they're not really cuts. They're manipulating the numbers. It was always going to be very hard to cut a lot if you're not allowed to touch 70 to 80% of the yearly budget, which is basically, as far as I can see, what this is in terms of them not looking at. And the other thing is, And at some point, the chickens are going to come home to roost, and the public is going to have to start turning. But right now, there's this really negative energy regarding Social Security. But I've even seen some of the top liberals who are more politically savvy say, no, we admit, we're looking at it, we're understanding the ratio between the current workers versus retirees. It is a big issue. It does have to be reformed. But that's the majority of people, even conservatives, boomer conservatives, they say, no, don't touch it. This is crazy. What are you doing? We get taxed on this. We should get our money. They don't understand it's one big scheme to where it's a pay as you go. And we're running out of money to be able to pay the retirees because we don't have enough workers making up the taxes to pay. So even some liberals are now turning on that, but people haven't turned quick enough. And you've got the 2026 midterms. This is something that's being used by Democrats. And it's almost like a double negative to where they say you're cutting Social Security. And then you look at it, it's like they're not cutting anything within Social Security. They need to reform Social Security, but they're not cutting anything. So it's like we're trying to fix it. We're not doing anything, which is why the deficit is what it is. And they're saying per year, I got the numbers, that the data was $300 billion increase in the deficit per year with this new spending bill by Trump. And so what Musk has pivoted to now is he said, well, the cuts are not going to happen. People are saying, well, maybe they'll come in a year or 2 years. They said they want to stop Doge in mid-2026. Now Musk has pivoted, says, I'm working, with Tesla and Grok and doing all the AI stuff. And he says, well, no, what we need to do now is we need to improve our GDP, which you could say, well, all right, we're going to deregulate more in nuclear. It's come out with the recent executive orders, like 4 or 5 executive orders on nuclear. They're deregulating everything, and they want to up their nuclear energy production by about times 4, quadrupling it, is what they said. And they want 10 wide-scale, massive nuclear power plants built, or at least started, by 2030, along with the smaller modular plants. And so they're going to invest heavily into nuclear energy. And I think that's bipartisan, and we can accept that. And I'm even someone that's more lukewarm to where most conservatives say it's the most obvious thing ever. It's nuclear. The idea of having all these nuclear power plants across the United States, I understand nuclear is the bridge in between renewable and non-renewable. And you could say, well, it's the happy medium. But there are some things, some environmental risks that come with it in terms of if something goes awry, it is a doomsday scenario, because if something happens to one of those plants, that land is unusable for decades to come. It's a big problem. I'm not saying there's going to be a Chernobyl. I know we have significantly better technology, but you're also talking about those being targets in terms of missile strikes, things like that. That's why we have the Golden Dome now, though, so hopefully that will help protect us. That's a $25 billion initial upfront investment by Trump. It's so obvious. It's a way upgraded version. I mean, NORAD's something completely different. They say, well, do we already have NORAD? No, this is going to shoot missiles down in case something happens to where they don't detect it, to where NORAD systems don't work. We're partnering with Canada on that, and we're going to be paying the most of it, but they say it's around, people originally said it was going to be $1 trillion. It's less than $1 trillion for the Golden Dome. It's about $150 billion for a significant missile defense system, which is so obvious, I think, to get these upgraded defenses. And it's going to help people in terms of having a better peace of mind in case something happens around the world. At least we're going to have something to hopefully be a upgraded version of what we currently have with NORAD in terms of being a deterrent. And so there's that as well. But Musk now has shifted, and he said, well, we want to up the GDP so we can cut into the deficit and then hopefully the debt. Well, all right, if you want more AI, it's an arms race with NVIDIA, with all these language models, Google, ChatGPT, and you want to deregulate, we can talk about that. But we know when Musk talks about upping the GDP, it's through immigration. And it's a bigger labor force. So, yeah, we're not about that. And so Musk has already endorsed the H-1Bs, and I said the O-1s are necessary. We need to bring in higher skilled labor. That's not what the H-1Bs are. The H-1B is grunt work for billionaires. That's why Bernie Sanders is against H-1Bs. And so this is the problem. It's like up the this is what feminists say as well. They say, well, look at all the women and what they contribute to the GDP. This obsession with GDP. I understand it's a way to, if you up it significantly, you're able to cut into the deficit and then hopefully the debt. I mean, when you're talking about 150 billion in terms of the military budget, the rise, it's going to be about 1.01 trillion in terms of the military budget. It is significant. And I know I just talked about the Golden Dome, but the Golden Dome's a 25 billion investment. It's not 150 billion. The total military budget rise will be 150 billion, and a lot of Republicans still support that. But I tell them, listen, it's to me, I'm surprised Trump did that. I really am. I didn't think he would raise the military budget by 150 billion based off of our current situation with the debt that we have right now, with the amount of interest we're paying to service it every year. And on top of that, we've got a situation in 2026 that's going to require us to refinance more debt, hopefully at a lower interest rate, but still it's going to cost us another 100, 200, 250 billion, something like that. I've looked at the numbers and I've seen experts, and people agree. They say it's about $250 billion in tariff revenue a year. It's not going to be 700 billion. People are saying $1 trillion, 500 billion. I originally said 250. Then I said, well, let me do all the calculations. It was about 400 billion. But now these experts are saying, well, you can't rely on that. And I agree, because of the way these companies are going to operate. Some of them are just going to produce domestically, or they're going to find other countries. Although we are going to try and not allow that, but they're going to find loopholes to it. It's just the reality of capitalism, and you're probably going to get around 250, maybe 300 billion. We'll be interested to see if Trump keeps the auto tariffs on. I also think we're going to get a really good new trade deal with Mexico and Canada. But the point is, you're not going to generate, the tariff revenue is not going to eliminate our deficit. There's just no way. It's 200 billion, 300 billion, maybe at the most 400 billion, I would say, unless Trump goes back to the crazy hardline stance. And it's just like the situation with the EU, to where everybody knows that it's a threat with Trump doing the 50% tariff on them. He said, well, June 1st. Okay. He wants them to come to the negotiating table and start cooperating in a more fair manner, what he deems. I mean, he's got his people coming to him saying they're not giving in. They're not doing anything. All right, we'll publicly say we're going to tariff them and threaten them with a 50% tariff. That's really what that is. So I can understand Musk being upset, but Doge was always going to run into problems if they were not allowed to touch the big boy spenders, which is the entitlements. And you can say, well, the entitlements there's no reason to touch them right now, because you've got the midterms in 20. I mean, the time to touch them would be right now, and it would be through this bill, because you'd still have another year and a half before the midterms really heat up. But people say it's radioactive. You can't touch them. But at some point, they're going to have to be touched. They're going to have. There's no choice. Social Security is not sustainable. Medicare, Medicaid. There's 200-300. I mean, they've already found around 90 billion per year in savings off of Medicaid. Medicare costs more. Social Security costs even more. And so they find like $500 or $600 billion in fraud or cuts to these things, to where you just chop off a lot of it. And per year, you're talking about a $2 trillion deficit. That's 1/4 of it, maybe even almost half of it cut in terms of the deficit. If you can cut some of these entitlements that are realistically allowable, people will fearmonger. And the problem is that no matter what you do, the second you talk about any of these entitlements, it's just automatically you're going to cut everything. I mean, they just say they cut Social Security. They haven't touched Social Security at all. Why do you think we have the deficit that we do, and we're keeping it? Because we haven't touched Social Security. Trump was trying to get it to where there were no taxes on Social Security. He couldn't do that because of like these stipulations. And so, I mean, at this point, they're doing the tax cuts. Are we in the business right now to be cutting taxes? We'll see if it makes up for it in terms of the economic revenue, the lower unemployment, we hope. But we'll see. You're cutting government revenue when you already have a $2 trillion deficit. I mean, listen, short term, this is great. And that's why I said this is fine. Because the thing is, we want there to be a crypto bull run. We've already got Bitcoin over 105, 110K. Now we've got the strategic reserve, and they want to get to around 5% of the total supply of BTC, which is just phenomenal if they get 5%, especially if BTC becomes I mean, they're embracing digital currency, and BTC is literal digital gold. It's literal digital gold. That's what Bitcoin is. People are going to start understanding that more and more and more and more as we get to 2030, 2035, 2040. The transactions, the way you can do it is just so much better than banking, and it's just superior. And when something's superior, especially in the United States, it gets known and people use it more. And so That's why this investment into Bitcoin is so important. And they said, well, you know what? Most of the Bitcoin that we have now, we didn't even invest or buy anything. It's just seized assets that the government's taken. And now we're going to properly, instead of just selling them willy-nilly to a centralized exchange, we're going to properly store them in a strategic way. And that's why I think they also need to make an investment to buy more to get to 5% in supply, just like the BTC reserve said they wanted, the strategic reserve. So, now you've got crypto, you've got this new stablecoin bill. They're embracing the future. The Democrats were completely against it. They said, no, it's terrible. Trump and this administration, there's a lot more proactiveness. There's a lot more open-mindedness to the digital currencies. It's kind of ironic. The Republicans open-minded, but we're talking about digital currencies, not some of the other stuff. But the point here is, Musk has not been happy. He says you're not allowed to touch certain things. They supposedly they saved 150 billion. They can't even get that through Congress, the saving of 150 billion per year, because they just won't cut anything. And at some point, you're gonna have to start cutting stuff, because when you start getting to the point to where, and they say like 2040, 2045, about 25% of this, so a fourth of the budget is going to be used to service the debt. That's going to be a debt spiral. That can't happen. And people are fear-mongering. If you're talking about adding $300 billion to the debt with these crazy tax cuts, we don't want there to be money added to the debt. We really don't. And same thing with the deficit. But I mean, listen, we're getting these huge cuts and things like that. I said it's not good, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of great things that come from this. You've got the Golden Dome. You have things that people overlook, just like the refinement zones that they're setting up now. It's domestic refinement of minerals. You've got this mineral deal with Ukraine. We're also, I think, going to cut into the deficit and the debt in general. People say, well, no, this is years away. And it is years away. I agree. It's going to take a while to do. And we don't know exactly the amount of minerals. But, acquiring Greenland, at this point, we're not in the business to where we can spend all this money on Greenland with our current situation. We can give Denmark $20 billion and we'll take it over. That's about it. Or we're just going to take it over because we can't. The thing is Canada, they agree. I think that they want us to take it over, and they really should. I mean, based on where it's located. But it's like, my thought is that, well, they've estimated through the soil samples, Greenland, even you just look along the coastlines, maybe about $5 to $6 trillion in minerals. Now you have to extract all of that, and you have to be able to set up a system that allows you to do it. So there's going to be an investment, a significant investment into even mining it. But even if you're just talking about without the glacier melt, $5 to $6 trillion, they say, I mean, maybe 2 to 3 trillion, and then you get the glacier melts. Maybe Greenland can help us cut into it. I mean, we'll see. Musk now is more so, he said he's focused on GDP, and maybe that's through AI development. I think that's probably what it is. The issue is, that if you're talking about GDP growth, significant GDP growth to affect the deficit, you could argue, well, how about GDP growth plus cuts? And normally the best solution is a combination when you do things like that. But a lot of that is like a bigger labor force. And one of the easiest things for the United States, and for when you're talking about a capitalist country, we have a system set up to where there are a lot of people that could be undiscovered talent. They could be smart, because they're in countries that have worse economic situations. They'd be willing to come to the United States and work for very cheap. And that's how the H-1B system kind of works to a degree, and also just the immigrants in general. That's why the liberals always talk about, well, if you deport these people, who's going to do all the grunt work for you? And that's just not a proper way to look at society. The number one thing should be the cultural aspect. It should be a demographic aspect. And I think people are starting to get back to that, to where we don't care too much about the GDP. It does become an issue, though, to where with Musk, he's like, well, if you're not going to let me cut anything, we have to upgrade the GDP. There's ways to do it without significantly increasing the labor force. I would imagine they're talking about through AI innovation, and maybe through nuclear energy. But that's one of the things that they were hinting at. So we'll see. But Musk, it's unfortunate they're not able to cut anything. We'll see if they're able to generate a higher GDP growth. But either way, guys, make sure you like the video down below. Also follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.